Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Wisteria here. This tale is called The Hound on the Hill. The long mind is a 10-mile ridge stretching out to the south of Church Stretton, a long brown wall on the horizon. It is a steep climb to the rugged moorland on top, a land of heather and whinberry, rush and grass. On a clear day, the top of mind is beautiful, with views across Shropshire, Hertfordshire, Wales and Cheshire. But even on a summer's day, it is a wild and remote place. Buzzards circling upwards on the mind's thresh. Their plaintive cry, a common sound. The land is deceptive, bog and marsh, masquerading a firm grassland. The flat-looking upland plateau creases into a myriad of little valleys, known as batches and hollows. In winter, it draws the snow, and even a thin blanket is treacherous, disguising the tracks and their markers, lying lightly over hidden hollows, and making the descent a terrifying battle against gravity. In serene beauty, it is undermined in that state, let alone in December, by place names such as Devil's Mouth and Deadman's Hollow. Even the December fair at Church Stenton became known as Deadman's Fair. Each year, drunken travellers and revellers would stagger homeward after sunset, their unsteady steps wending across the long mind. Every year, there were some who never made it home. It is not just the landscape, weather and loneliness that marks a long mind, a daunting place to travel at night, but the spirits and shades that shelter there, those are the ones you want to watch for. Up between the Portway and Rattling Hope is a hollow where there is something to be seen. A funeral procession making its way along the road, a hearse creaking and rattling by, the road thick with mourners behind it. Wild Eldrick sometimes roams the slopes in the form of a great black dog with fiery eyes. At other times, his wild hunt whirls over the long mind and across South Shropshire. The blast of Edric's horn, heralding disaster, disease, and death to come. The hunt comes with tremendous rushing wind. The thundering hooves mingle with the baying hounds, producing an overwhelming noise that pounds in every vein and fibre. One evening, a young lad was making his way home over the long mind. His errands done for the day, and it had been a beautiful day. But now the sun was low in the sky, and the shadows were lengthening. He walked briskly. He knew the trek well, but he also knew the stories. And he had a healthy respect for the road. He would prefer to get home before dark if he could. A movement in the heather caught his eye. Looking closer, he saw a patch of white and red, and then heard a whine. "Hey, boy," he said softly. "What are you doing up here on your own? Come on, let's have a look at you. Let's get you back home." With that flash of white and red fur, he assumed it must be a young foxhound, footsore and separated from the pack. He picked a handful of leaves and dipped them in a pool of water. "Here, boy, let's bind up those paws for you and get you to kennels." The dog came out from the heather, and it was no foxhound. It must have been lying in a dip, for it was the size of a calf, with a rough white coat and red ears. The boy's hands holding the leaves began to shake. It was a hound of the hill, a fairy hound, one of the wild hunt's hounds. Still, it was too late now. He'd talked to it already, and here it was, looking at him and waiting. He couldn't walk on and pretend not to see it now. So he mustered his courage, gently lifted the paws one by one and bound up the pads. He tipped his cap to the dog and said, "There you go, sir. Now your paws will get you back to your home, and I'll be off to mine." The hound wagged its tail and disappeared off into the heather. The lad pulled his jacket close to him and walked briskly back home. The seasons turned, nothing bad happened, and the lad stopped thinking about his encounter. But one evening, the lad was making his way home along the same road. This time night had fallen. The track was slick with rain, and the drizzle sucked the heat out of him. The road led up and down the hollows of the summit, and as the lad climbed out of the dip, he saw ahead of him a huge beast, an enormous dog with eyes like fire. The lad froze. It was Edric. Edric at his most wild, his humanity forgotten, a creature of loss, rage and vengeance, the instinct to hunt and kill pounding in its ears. It lifted its great head to smell the air and then turned toward the lad, its eyes settling on him like two glowing coals. The boy knew that he mustn't run or speak, but it took all his strength to stand firm as the hound padded towards him with a slow, deliberate steps. The breath grew ragged in the boy's chest. The fiery eyes drew level with his own. He braced himself for whatever might come. Then something white and red exploded from the undergrowth and barreled into the black dog. Taken by surprise, the black dog was knocked to the ground. But in a moment it was up. The lad saw the great white and red hound of the hill take stance opposite the black apparition, and for a moment the two circled each other. Then they both leapt forward, and the two dogs fought, snarling and growling, worrying at each other, biting, tearing, tumbling over one another. The lad stood rooted to the ground, watching. The terrible noise of the battle rent the night. At last, the two dogs split apart to prowl in a circle around one another. The black dog stood for a moment, staring at the red and white hound, and then moved its glowing eyes to rest on the lad. Suddenly it turned and loped off into the darkness. The panting hound looked at the lad, his tongue hanging out of his mouth. His tail gave a wag, but the lad knew better than to thank the animal. Slowly, the boy put his hand to his cap and nodded his head. "Good night, sir." The hound vanished into the night. The lad walked safely home. The end. And yeah, I like that. Fairy hounds are indeed very special. And if you manage to help a fairy hound, I assure you the favour shall be returned tenfold. But not only that, don't thank them, because they will eat you probably. I'm just being honest. They don't like that. So yeah, I like that story. It's very good. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy my stories, please consider subscribing because it helps. And leave a like and share if you can. Many blessings.